Today on Time to Discuss, I have Roger Smith with me. Roger, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be able to share some ideas.
Roger, you are a chief technology officer. You have a
Mhm.
strong background in tech, obviously, and you're also an author. So let's start with your current role as a CTO. What's a typical day like for you?
I don't think there's a typical for all CTOs. That's something we'll probably get into. Um, but typically, you get up, you get to work, and as much as you're trying to be a leadership role and executive strategic thinking, that kind of thing, there's always very tactical day-to-day problems that are knocking on your door. Some product or supplies didn't get delivered, so therefore you can't do the manufacturing run you wanted today, or some regulation, we haven't checked a box. There's all these little tactical things that jump up and get you when you're trying to think more strategically. You're trying to think more broadly, trying to position the organization for what's coming in the next year. And it's knocking on the problem's knocking on your door, what needs to be done for tomorrow or the next day. And that used to kind of irritate me because you're like, that's what you're supposed to be doing as you're moving up the chain. But I started reading about how CEOs of really big companies spend their day. And it turns out the exact same thing happens to them. These urgent matters that are not really impactful on the company for a year or two in the future, but impactful right now, demand their attention right in the morning. And I was like, okay, I feel better. This is how all businesses run. This is how all leaders spend their day. So that's kind of how things get started.
Now, can you give us an example, something tangible, something that kind of fits those shoes with a problem that might creep up or something like that demands your immediate attention?
I was the CTO for a research and development branch of the hospital. And we manufacture these devices that are used in surgical training. They're kind of like puzzles, surgical puzzles that a surgeon in training has to solve, work their way through. It involves cutting tissue and exposing a vessel and then cauterizing it, doing all these things that a surgeon would do. And manufacturing that, we require a lot of specific kinds of materials for the 3D printer that makes the parts. And of course, you've got an order from, I won't mention the name of the mega international company that needs 20 of these to be shipped in a few days so that they can have them by their deadline. And you arrive the day that you're supposed to be in the production run, and you find out one of the ingredients that needs to go into that 3D printer, not all of them, just one of the ingredients, is we're out. And well, we have some in supply, don't we? No, of course, the one you ran out of is not the one you have another canister of in supply. And so there's this immediate, oh my gosh, how long to actually get one? And the answer is always longer than you have to spend. But then your solution is, let's all stop panicking. We've been buying from this vendor for years. Call them. Tell them you need one FedEx and you need it tomorrow. And sure enough, their answer is all of our customers make those kinds of calls. We get that kind of thing all the time. And so grabbing one and FedExing it is something that we're very used to. But when it happens in your organization for the first time, you try to be the adult in the room who says, calm, calm. It's not a problem that has never happened to anybody else before. It's the kind of problem that I'm sure has happened before, and there's a solution for it. So that's a good example. So you get the canister a day later, and you can make up lost time.
That's a good story. That's a good one. That reminds me, I think, well, you said you hit the nail on the head. I think, that ability to stay calm under what could be an insurmountable amount of pressure,
Yeah.
like if it could be something like that, it could be a data breach. It could be,
Yes.
a ransomware or something like that. So the ability to keep your cool is key, I think. That's good they brought that up.
The problem you're about to solve, it probably is going to get solved at the same speed, whether you're frantic and worried or whether you're calm. And so it's your ability to either react to the situation with emotions or to respond with more clear-headed thinking.
Now, Roger, let me ask you this. Have you always been that way? Have you always been a little more, I'm going to say laid back for lack of better words, or did over time you learn to just kind of take the back seat just a little bit and kind of, all right, let's think about this and then proceed? How did that develop for you?
In terms of high strungness, I think I was in the middle. I wasn't always just like, oh, this is easy to, this is something we should calmly think about. I was somewhere in the middle, so it wasn't, I didn't get spun up every day. Like you see a few people that get spun up every day. It's their normal modus operandi. But I learned about the difference between reacting and responding, specifically by reading books about leadership and listening to podcasts about leadership and hearing people the generation older than me talk about that same situation. And so I didn't make up the statement that the problem gets solved in the same amount of time, whether you're emotionally excited or whether you're calm. That was something I learned from one of the books somewhere.
I like that expression. I got to remember that. No matter if you overreact or underreact, it gets the problem gets solved in the same amount of time, pretty much. I'll have to go back to the recording and actually listen to that, actually commit that, because I do like that expression. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So talk to us about your role getting into the CTO position. How did you advance your career? What kind of opportunities were you able to leverage to get where you are?
I didn't start out with advantages that clearly said this guy's going to make it to this level. My education were all from state universities. They were good universities, but by no means was it Harvard or Yale, or was my father a CEO of a company. None of those good things happened. So I'm working in the engineering field, writing software and solving problems on at first aircraft and then later computers and networks. And I looked around and went, I'm pretty much the same as all the other engineers and programmers here. I work hard to try and be among the better, the top half or something. And so working harder and doing a good job and studying to become better at the profession, that got me promotions. So I was, on schedule a little faster. Do you remember when a promotion was something that was almost in a table where it said,
Yes.
at 3 years you get this promotion, at 5 you get this one, at 7 you get this one. So yeah, I don't know if that's still relevant. But at the time, I was hitting my marks or a little sooner. And so I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm doing well. The hard work wasn't what made the jump possible. So I started doing something that nobody else was doing. I was working in military simulation, and we were building simulators like flight simulators and ground tank simulators and things like that. And I noticed that a lot of my coworkers, they would understand a slice of what we were doing, but not the whole project, and not understand the technologies that went into the graphics and the networking and the computer processing and the data storage and all those things. They didn't understand all that. So I started teaching a university course, a graduate course, on how to build a simulator, what are all the components that are in it. And the students that came through were kind of my peers. I was intimidated. I was like, what am I doing? How am I to teach this stuff? But I quickly learned that I had learned about the system much more broadly. And so they were all learning something they didn't know. And I got a tap on the shoulder one day, and this company said, we'd like to make a commercial course out of that. So instead of teaching for the university, we'll set you up in a hotel. You'll teach the whole semester in a 3 or 4 day seminar, and you'll get paid as much more for that seminar than you get paid for a whole semester at the university. So I started teaching that seminar. And at first, it's just a revenue generator for me, and it's also, it feeds my ego, makes me feel good about what I'm doing, what I'm contributing. But after a while, that seminar became known as the place that somebody in military simulation would go to learn the breadth of their craft. Very lucky. And I didn't have anybody that was doing something exactly like that. And because I was working in the field and had this reputation as an instructor, or I don't know what else it would be called, but a reputation for knowing this stuff broadly, after a few hundred students had been through, people in organizations that would hire me began to notice. And so they would hire me to be a director in their engineering department, or finally a CTO in their engineering department. And I think the only reason that happened was because I was teaching these courses on the side. I think I could have been doing my job at the 90th percentile really, really well. And it wouldn't have led to that kind of opportunity, because it wouldn't have generated a reputation or an awareness of the fact that I was available to do that kind of work.
When you started teaching, I'd like to look at that briefly. How
Okay.
did that actually unfold? Did you approach a college or university and try to teach at like the non-credit level, or did you enter as an adjunct? How did that actually start for you?
Yeah, I entered as an adjunct. The area where I'm at, there are, or there were at the time, let's say 4 different universities teaching graduate programs in computer science or operations research. And those graduate degrees were targeted at professionals, not at people who were doing their graduate work before going to work, but those who were working professionally and going back to school at night. And so I went into the director of the program and I pitched him on a course about interactive simulation, and I had an outline for the course and said, this is the kind of thing I'd like to teach. And it fits in with the audience that's here in this geographic area. It's the kind of thing they need to know. And he agreed with that and said, that would attract students, more revenue for us. That sounds like a good idea. And so they created it as an elective in their Master's in Operations Research program.
I actually was speaking with another professor, oh geez, probably a couple months ago at this point. And she was a tenured professor, and we were talking about different courses that she taught and the courses she created as a
Uh-huh.
tenured professor. So I was just curious, like you entering from that angle, how that worked for you. So that's good to get both perspectives there. That's really neat. Let me ask you this, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm still just kind of curious. How easy is it, if at all, is it even possible, is someone that is in like the C-suite to pivot from like one area of expertise to another? So you
Mhm.
talked about you're comparing yourself to a CEO and like dealing with the problems essentially at different levels. How important is it? And again, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. How important is it that you have that very, very strong technical background to be a CTO? Or can someone that has it like they have a broader understanding of like the organization, they have maybe some tech expertise, how successful would they be, especially when you're relying on the expertise of those people that are below you? Can you talk
Right.
about that?
Yeah, that's tough. I would say, to be fair, in most organizations, the CTO or the director of technology, which is another common title, they don't become the CEO or the COO. But it's not that nobody has. So I can give you 2 examples of somebody who has, and we're going to start with a famous one. Intel Corporation. Right now, the CEO of Intel Corporation is Pat Gelsinger. Pat Gelsinger has been at Intel for his entire life, and he was an engineer designing chips, and then he moved into director of the research function, so of their research organization, and then he became the CTO. And so he was one of my exemplar CTOs. When I was first discovering this role and trying to figure out what a CTO does, he was one of the exemplars that I stumbled onto, and I read about his career. And now if you look at him, he's running Intel. Now you'd think, well, Intel is a tech company, so that kind of is a good fit. I think that's also an indication of when a CTO can probably move to the CEO role. If the organization had been, I don't know, a moving company or an airline or something like that, might not have ever happened, but a chip company. And so then a lesser known company, and I won't mention them because they're in some turmoil right now, but it's a company that I worked for, and they had a chief scientist who, when the founder of the company, who was also the CEO, left, the chairman of the board looked around and went, this chief scientist we have has been part of our organization for over a decade. Let's take a chance on him. Let's make him the CEO. And so he jumped from technology to CEO, sorry, of the company. And that company is primarily an artificial intelligence company. So again, you're like, I see the synergy there where the product is a technology that you would want somebody with a lot of depth in.
Sticking with education, or circling back, I should say, how important is it to have degrees in technology to be a CTO? Should you have a master's in some area of technology? Should you have a PhD? What's been your experience like for that?
During the time I was coming up, I think it was almost essential to have a master's degree in some kind of technical field. For one, when I first started working professionally, a master's degree was a rare thing. So you would look around your department of, let's say, 20 people, and there would be 3 or 4 that would have a master's degree, and everybody else was bachelor's. So it sets you above or more notable than everybody else right away. But then for a long time, a master's degree was the only credential that people could use to guess at how talented you would be, in addition to your performance, or how deep you could go into designing chips or whatever you're going to do. So at one point, I thought, for a decade or more of my career, I thought, yeah, I would always say it's an essential thing. You finish your bachelor's degree, you'll get your master's degree. Now, I think that story is a little less clear because of 2 reasons. One, there are a lot of really good credentialing organizations where you can go to Coursera or any of the other learning platforms, and you can get some really good, deep education that focuses on one thing. You don't have to do the broader curriculum like a university would put you through. And so you can get, and you can get it quickly. So a certificate of some kind you can rip through in a few weeks, maybe a couple of months. I know that because I did the same. I did exactly that recently, or recently in the last 5 years. So there are alternatives that are really good. And industry, I think in a large part, thanks to what has happened in Silicon Valley, has recognized the value of those alternate forms of certification. So the no, they're not called .com anymore, but the AI and the cloud companies that have been shooting up, they need people so badly that those certificates are something that they can use to hire in the right talent and then test them and see if they do well or not. So that's one thing. I think there's an alternate route now that's recognized. The other one is unfortunate. University education, the tuition has exploded at something like 4 or 5 times the inflation rate. And so a person seeking a master's degree now will pay a lot more for it than I paid for mine. And it might be that the education you're getting isn't worth what you're paying for it. And so, or not reachable because it's so expensive. And so if you can find an alternative, maybe it's a better idea to try an alternative before you plunk down crazy numbers, $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 for a master's degree.
That's a good perspective. That's interesting. I was actually just having a conversation with someone the other day. We were talking about the state of colleges and the state of universities now, and where they could be in 5 years, what that landscape could look like.
Right.
Is it going to be much different? Is it going to be the same? I could see it going either way. It's going to be very interesting, I think, in the next few years.
It is. I think there's a wave of people in their 20s right now that's larger than what's following behind them. And so there's a reckoning coming when that wave gets done with their chosen level of education, and the next wave comes through and it's 30% smaller or whatever it exactly is. So you'll go to your local university and you'll find out they're begging for students or they have empty buildings or whatever.
Roger, I'm sure you've gotten this question before. But I'm going to throw this one at you anyway.
Okay.
What's the sort of, from a technology perspective, what's the sort of thing that keeps you up at night?
But literally, instead of thinking of what could keep me up, let's literally say what it is. It's not being fast enough to master that next wave that's coming. Um, right now, it's hard not to talk about AI right now because that's what everybody's talking about. Everybody is trying to figure out what AI is going to do their business. Even if it's a lawn service business, putting chemicals on your lawns to keep the weeds away, everybody is trying to figure out what can I do with this tool called AI? And the people who have call centers or scheduling departments, for them, it's pretty clear. It's like, oh, I see what I can do. I can answer questions without a real human having to be involved all the time. But everybody else wants to know, can it help me schedule flights for an airline? Can it help me schedule the trucks that run around and deliver those chemicals to my lawn? Will it help them schedule faster? Would it help you lay out the products in a warehouse better? So I think everybody is right now worried about being late to that. That you're worried about how much am I going to have to spend to be at the front edge of that? And will that spend pay for itself? Or will we find out that we were already optimized and AI helped a little bit, but not worth what we paid for it, or it didn't help at all?
If you could look into a crystal ball, where do you think it's headed? Do you think it's going to be mostly hype? Do you think it's going to be make as big of a difference in as short amount of time as people think? Or do you think it's just going to be kind of like that, like somewhere in the middle? It's, it's going to be a really great tool that people will be able to leverage. What do you think?
I think it's going to be pretty much just like the internet was, the original internet, 1998 to 2000 or whatever it was. Um, if you're familiar with Gartner's hype cycle curve, I think the hype is by definition or by the natural state of the way our country works, the hype is always going to be bigger than the reality. But I think the reality is going to be big. And so there's a real curve there. There's a real improvement there for most companies. And some of them are going to pay 5x to discover it and wish they hadn't paid so much. And others are going to figure out a way to pay 1x, meaning paying and getting an improvement that brings that revenue back. And some are going to, have a more reasonable spend on achieving those benefits. But I think it's definitely there. And at the executive level, there isn't an executive team that can afford not to work on it and spend on it. And from an employee perspective, there isn't an employee who wouldn't benefit by for example, going to Coursera and taking some of their deep learning or AI courses. On Coursera, I've taken the courses and the certificates that are there from a company called deeplearning.ai. And I started on those 4 or 5 years ago. And back then there was only 1 or 2 courses. And by now I've taken, I think, every course they've created. Those are great courses and they're not easy. They're difficult. They're college level, maybe graduate level, difficult courses. But they're really, really good. So I think most employees need to bet on that.
I was actually speaking with a gentleman a couple weeks ago. By the time your video goes live, his will be live as well. And he was
Okay.
talking about using AI as a tool to aid in marketing efforts. Really interesting conversation. And I've tech in my blood, so I could talk with you about this for hours probably. Roger, unfortunately, we are a little short on time. So one thing I do like to do when I'm speaking with someone, I like to give them an opportunity to talk about maybe a cause they believe in, a project they're working on. So if there's something that you'd like to discuss, I'd like to hand the floor over to you.
Given my stage in life, I asked myself the other day, what is something I haven't done that I always wanted to do? And I said to myself, I want to write a fiction novel. I've never done that. I think I want to do it. And my most recent focus in my career has been on robotic surgery. So yeah, so I've now written 3 fiction novels. It was a series on what robotic surgery is going to be like in the year 2050 and beyond. And so I get to write about technologies that we speculate on now, but write about them as if they've already happened. And that's what I do. So my author name is R.D.D. Smith, and the website is rddsmith.com. So I've been writing those novels about the future of robotic surgery.
That is awesome. I think that's going to be very interesting. I think just not only from a book perspective, but looking realistically at what the future could bring with robotic surgeries. I know that it's in use in some capacity in some places. I remember listening to a TED Talk about it. But where it's going to be in 25 years, I think it's going to be incredible. And I think those books that you're writing are going to be very, very interesting. I'll make sure I get the links from you. I know you said it, but I'll get it and make sure I get the right one as well. I'll put it in the show links. I'll put it on the web so people can find those books when they're looking for them.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Absolutely. Roger, it's been absolutely awesome speaking with you today and learning what it's like to be a CTO.
All right. Thank you. I enjoyed doing it myself.
Thanks for popping in the studio. My name is Dan, and this is Time We Discuss. I really enjoyed speaking with Roger today, and I hope you enjoyed the time too. Make sure you check the links in the description to learn more. If there's a profession they want me to cover, add a comment and I'll find that person for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That'll do it. See you next time on Time We Discuss.